Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot has decided that on her second-year anniversary of being in office, she's only going to grant journalists of color one-on-one interviews. A reporter named Craig, who I assume is white, asked her if she was implying that white reporters can't do a fair job of covering her. Here's part of her answer.
It has nothing to do about you, Craig, with due respect, or anybody else. What it has to do about is the facts. And the facts is that when I look out at across this podium, as I'm doing now, I don't see much in the way of diversity. The fact that the City Hall press corps is overwhelmingly white, has very little in the way of diversity, is an embarrassment. We are a city that is almost 3/4 people of color. I believe that the City Hall press corps needs to reflect the diversity of our city. Everybody, me, you, everybody brings our life experiences to the way that we perceive events. All of us bring an implicit bias. And what I'm saying is, it's way past time. It's way past time for the City Hall press corps and the people that do the hiring and make the decisions to get the memo. We are in a time where we're having a powerful and important conversation around systemic racism in every institution. And the press and the media can't be exempt from that conversation.
Okay. It's true that most journalists have a biased way of reporting. Most of them are actually biased in her favor because they're mostly Democrats. But that wasn't really what she was talking about. She said implicit bias, and that means to have unconscious attitudes and stereotypes about different social groups. And we know which social group she's talking about. She's not saying that she's being treated unfairly by the press, at least not intentionally. She's saying that because most of the reporters are white, their subconscious may not allow them to cover her fairly. Then she goes on to blame systemic racism as the reason most of the reporters in the press corps lack melanin. The way she sees it is that if the demographic of the reporters that cover the city of Chicago aren't exactly the same as the demographic that makes up the city of Chicago, it must be due to racism. Now, obviously her reasoning is very flawed. The demographic of the press corps not matching the city of Chicago's is no more evidence of systemic racism than the demographic of the Chicago Bulls roster not matching the demographic of the city of Chicago. It's not evidence of systemic racism at all. And had anyone in the press corps been out to give her bad optics, they could have easily called her out. But of course they didn't, because even with all of their implicit biases, they don't want to make her look bad. Now, what I find interesting about her answer to that question is her answer to the next question. She's asked about why the number of murders and violent crimes are up in her city.
Well, let me give a little context. We ended 2019 with under 500 homicides for the first time in years, and then COVID struck. And I think if you look and follow your history, what you're going to find is every major city across the country, New York, LA, St. Louis, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Denver, every single city across the country has faced a skyrocketing increase in violent crime. Part of this is obviously due to COVID. We will always be fighting a losing battle when it comes to gun violence if we don't get help from the federal government. When you can go to Indiana and buy literally military-grade weapons at any quantity that you want, if you've got the resources to buy them, and then they show up where? In communities like Auburn, Gresham.
I'm sorry, but she's completely wrong in blaming COVID or guns for the spike in violent crime. I mean, are we supposed to believe that people who were laid off from their jobs turned to rape and murder to make ends meet? And if the access to guns in Indiana is the problem, then why don't they have the same violent crime problem in Indiana? The fact is, murder rates in major cities across the country have spiked because Democrats wanted to use the anger of black people for political purposes. It's because of the defund the police and BLM movements. And it's because of the ridiculous police reform bills that states are passing in the name of ending systemic racism. You see, the mayor's complaint in her answer to the first question about why there aren't enough journalists of color is actually the reason there's been a dramatic increase in the number of people being murdered. If you keep telling black people that the system is designed to allow cops to hunt them down in the streets, and that it's been set up to allow inferior whites to get the jobs that black candidates are better qualified for, what would you expect to happen? For the last few years, and especially in 2020, an election year, the far left, with the support of mainstream Democrat politicians, were out to motivate the minority vote. And getting them angry is the easiest way to do that. And while it might have led to Donald Trump being defeated, it's also led to a lot of police officers feeling afraid to do their job, and even resulted in a lot of veteran cops retiring. In the state of Illinois, where Chicago's located, the governor signed a police reform bill that's chock full of terrible ideas. I'll give you 3 examples. The first one is that it got rid of the cash bail system, so now many criminals will be released immediately after they're arrested. It also allows anonymous complaints against police officers, so many cops will get complaints for simply doing their job correctly. And the third terrible thing this legislation does is not allow officers to review their body camera footage before writing their reports. And get this, if there is important information in the footage that they accidentally leave out of the report, it's considered police misconduct, which this legislation has made a Class 3 felony. And convicted of that crime generally carries a 2 to 5 year prison sentence. I'm sorry, but it's politicians like Mayor Lightfoot that are creating an environment that emboldens the criminal elements of our society. Do you think defunding the police makes communities safer? Do you think allowing felons to be immediately released after they're arrested makes it less likely that another crime will be committed? And do you think constantly telling a group of people that the system is designed to hold them down will inspire them to take responsibility for their own lives? What's really frustrating is that Mayor Lightfoot, a black person herself, knows how to get ahead in America. In high school, she was on the basketball, volleyball, and softball teams. She played trumpet in the school band and sang in the choir. She was the yearbook editor and a member of the pep club. And she was voted class president 3 times. Oh, and did I mention that most of her classmates were white? After that, she worked several different jobs to help pay her tuition at the University of Michigan, where she graduated with honors. Then she worked for a couple of different congressmen before deciding to become a lawyer. She got a full scholarship to the University of Chicago, where she became president of the law school student body. Then she worked as a lawyer, quickly making partner at a law firm. Then eventually went into government, and in 2019 was elected as the mayor of Chicago. And instead of telling black people how they too can get ahead like she did, she blames their failures on systemic racism. She grew up in a predominantly white town in the 1960s and 70s, where you would think she would have faced racism at every turn. But she didn't. She excelled. And that's a stark difference to what she saw when she moved to Chicago for law school. I never felt more black in my life than I did in my 3 years in Hyde Park. That's what Lightfoot said after seeing the inner city conditions there. If only she could have been able to see what created the difference between the conservative, predominantly white town she excelled in growing up versus what she saw in Chicago, a city with decades of Democrat rule and progressive policies. But like so many successful black progressives, in spite of her success and how hard she's worked to achieve it, she can look at a group of mostly white news reporters and assume that out of the 12,000 journalism degrees that are awarded every year, the only reason that these handful of mostly white reporters made it to where they are is because their employers were unconsciously racist. Whether she knows it or not, what she's doing is actually making things worse for the very people she claims she wants to help. And that's the simple truth. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and if you want to become a supporting member of Blue Collar Logic, click on the link in the description and give what you can.